Welcome to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Today's guest is Chris Lippincott, a psychic medium and best-selling author of Spirits Beside Us. If you've ever had questions about what a medium does, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Chris, welcome to the program.
Hey, Johnny, how you doing?
Good. So you have a very long list of mediums that you studied with, mentored with. How did you find yourself on this path?
Well, that's a good question. How did I find myself kind of encountering spirit? I think I've been aware of spirit probably since I was a child. I know that when I was very young, probably 6 or 7, like many kids, I was encountering a lot of imaginary playmates and having a grand old time, speaking with them and carrying on conversations. The thing that I should have noticed was the fact that they could talk back to me. We were having full-on conversations. But as a kid, I thought it was kind of, everybody did that. That went on for a while, and I was having a wonderful time. And then I started realizing later on that the spirits, especially when I went to bed, were trying to get in contact with me because I could hear their voices, I could hear their communications, I could feel their hands on my back when I went to sleep.
Oh, my.
Yeah. And
I remember that in the book. That was
kind of freaked me out.
Yes. That was pretty creepy. That would freak anybody out.
Yeah, totally. So that was clearly one of the catalysts that basically got me to shut down the portal because, not only was I starting to grow older, more logical, more analytical and thinking, what are these silly things? But also I was starting to get freaked out because I was starting to look at it from a Hollywood perspective of, this must be monsters. They're going to take me under the bed. They're going to take me off to their lair. Let me run away. So basically I was kind of like, all right, let me just shut down this portal and begged them to go away. So eventually they listened to me. They went away. They knew I didn't want to interact. And so for a good, 30 years, probably for a good 30 years or so, I was so adamant about shutting them down that they weren't interacting with me, but they were always around me because I could always feel that energy. I could always feel like something behind me. I could always feel like I'd peer behind my shoulder and I know there was an energy behind me. But I kind of thought it was just like some kind of psychosis I had from childhood, like, I've got to have some deep-seated fear of the dark or something. But then it really happened that one day when I was in my man cave doing meditations, because I'd been doing meditations during a period of my adult life, when I was still doing finance and I was getting totally stressed out, I stumbled upon meditation. I said, hey, wow, this seems to work. I got to cool out. I got to, chill out. And I got into meditation, was doing it for probably 20 minutes every day. So I'm in my man cave one weekend doing my meditation for 30 minutes. And all of a sudden, I'm like, what is going on? Because all of a sudden in my mind's eye, I saw these 4 spirit people. They were almost like a silhouette in a grayish, cloudyish kind of background. And I thought I recognized them, but I couldn't place them. There were 2 on my left, 2 on my right. One all the way on the farthest right-hand side was the biggest one. And he sent this beam of energy right through my chest and out my back. And I can remember it to this day. And I can remember thinking, wow, if if I can feel that beam of energy going through me physically, I know I'm still awake. I know I haven't fallen asleep and I'm not dreaming. And I remember as that beam of energy went through me, it was like this intense feeling of overwhelming love, unconditional love. The human word love doesn't even begin to describe the meaning. All I knew was that all of a sudden I began to go into a place of endless love, where the tapestry of love just never ended. There was no beginning, there was no ending, and everything was all the same. It was kind of like this unity consciousness. And looking back on it, I started to realize that all the things I experienced back then are very similar to what a lot of people, when they describe their NDEs, describe. So I'm like, wow, this is the same thing.
I was just about to say that. And you also touched on another interesting topic, which is the unity, in other words, oneness.
Yeah. Totally.
Which comes up in discussions about this in the Akashic Records discussions and obviously reincarnation. So you're lucky. Hopefully everybody gets to feel that when they're alive. Well, we hope we are going to feel that when we pass.
At some point, everybody will, yes.
Yeah, that would be amazing. I noticed you use the term spirit spirit world. Where does that term come from? Your mentors?
The word spirit essentially is derived from the concept that we're all energy. All matter, or I can't even use the word matter, all substance throughout the universe is energy. 99.9% of existence is empty space. That empty space is composed of pure energy. So we here in the physical, we're energy, but we're dense energy. If you remember your high school physics, it's like the ice cube that's got a vibration and oscillation that's moving really, really slowly. So think back to your physics. You've got your molecules, your atoms, your subatomic particles. They're all moving really, really slowly. So the vibration, the oscillation moving really slowly. Yet at the opposite end of that spectrum, at least in physical matter and physics, you've got gas, and gas, that's oscillating, vibrating at an incredibly high speed. Go to the plasmic state, even higher, even faster. Go to the spiritual state, it's no longer physical. You've gone beyond the physical matter. You've gone into a completely different dimension. The vibration rate goes even higher. So spirit is essentially our energy, the non-physical energy and consciousness, because consciousness is nothing but our energy that has moved beyond the physical state. So consciousness as energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but it must always exist. So spirit is the ever-present, ever-existing consciousness that we are, and we in the physical, we call ourselves humans. We are spirit incarnate, as opposed to spirit discarnate, which is in the afterlife.
I noticed two things: the vibrational frequencies, that comes up a lot in these types of discussions, and also quantum physics comes up quite a bit. That's pretty cool, because if you can understand that, it all begins to make some type of sense. So going back to when you just started discovering these skills, sensibilities, is it something that as young kids, if we really chose to, can we cultivate it, or do you have to kind of be born with that or inherit that frequency, as it were?
That's a great question. All children are, by definition, very sensitive to spirit. And the reason why is that all children are very creative. They're very open. They haven't yet been, shall I say, formatted to be logical and analytical. They're playful. All young children, like 5 or 6 years old, they're nothing but pure creativity. And they are very recently entered into the physical world, if you will. So the younger you are, the closer you are to having just come from the non-physical plane. You've just entered into the physical plane. So you're just a few years away from, entering. And the longer you go, from having incarnated, the longer your memory is going to fade away pretty quickly. But also, as children, you're naturally curious, you're naturally creative. There's nobody telling you how to think. There's nobody telling you you've got to be logical. There's nobody telling you these are your limiting beliefs. So children are open to this. Now, the difference becomes also one of cultural bias, a parental bias. Maybe the parents are either squelching the sensitivities, like, oh, no, we don't do that here, kind of thing. Or, they're like, yes, hey, wow, grandma, she's talking to people we can't see all the time. So what's the family doing? Is it in the family? Is grandma doing it? Is Aunt Jean doing it? Is it part of the culture? Is it part of their religious beliefs? Maybe they're like, oh, you can't do that. The Bible says you can't talk like that. So what's the religious belief? And then I'd say another part of it, another factor that you want to think about is, as far as the innate ability, it would go to how close to the surface that ability might be. Because we all have these non-physical senses.
We all have it. Okay.
We all have it. It's just a question of how close to the surface is that ability. It's like saying, okay, we all have the ability to play the piano. We can all bang on the keys, make pretty music. That's all nice. But which one of us is actually going to go to Carnegie Hall? Some of us have the ability right above the surface, right there. Some of us, it's like way down below. But you can all go to Carnegie Hall. The question is, it's an equation of time and effort. Some people need more effort to get to Carnegie Hall. Others don't. Same thing.
Reminds me of something I heard recently. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice.
Exactly. And that's the same thing here. It's practice, practice, practice. There is no difference.
Speaking of culture, if my grandmom, speaking of which, or some relative had those capabilities and really try to develop it, is that something that I might have a leaning towards, or is that neither here nor there?
Yeah, you very well could have. Like I said, it could become, how early in your childhood could it have been fostered? Could it have been brought through with your parents who were saying, yeah, come on, this is great, this is fantastic. If you want to go back to some of the studies that the Duke Perception of Sexual Studies, all their NDEs, they looked at how were the NDEs fostered? They go back to the childhood and they find out how soon after the incident that this happened. Are they older? Are they younger? So if you were younger and you had it, I would think it would actually be something that's fostered by the parents.
In our Western culture, not necessarily in Europe or in Asia, we have a lot of quirky images or perception of seances and such. People kind of make jokes. But a mediumship reading, what is a reading really like? Let's say someone comes to you and says, my mom and my dad passed a while back, or maybe it was recent. They want to see if they can get in touch with them. What do you need, or how would you even proceed with that?
Okay, well, if somebody came to me for a reading, especially now in the pandemic kind of situation, the first thing I would make sure is that they don't tell me any information at all, because I don't want it to know any information.
Really?
That's the first and foremost thing that...
No names,
no,
nothing.
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, because the less I know, the better. Because that way, I'm not getting biased with any information. I know the information that I'm receiving from spirit is pure. I'm not thinking, gosh, maybe this person lost their husband and I feel like this energy that I'm getting has got to be a husband. If I don't know that and I'm just getting pure, unfiltered energy and information, then I know I'm connecting with something that is beyond my own imagination. Also, if I don't know any information and I'm telling you information that there's no way that I could have known from anywhere else because you never told anybody, then you're in contact with spirit. Let's say, for example, that I'm telling you that you're holding on to your husband's ring on the second drawer of your bedside table, and I can see your bedside table in your room, and it was just moved, but now it's on the left-hand side of your bed next to and underneath a painting that you just put there of your dearly departed husband. But I've never been in your house, and nobody has ever told me about it. In fact, you just moved that painting. Where am I going to get this information?
There's no other place.
It sure as hell's not on YouTube.
Right. It's not on YouTube. It's not on Facebook. I guess there's no other way you could have possibly known that. The reason I ask is that some people are of the opinion that it helps to have a name. My two sisters went to a medium in the Orlando area. I forgot to ask. I think they did give a name, just a first name, and they apparently made contact with one of our sisters that passed, and possibly my oldest brother. But I always wondered about that. Is it best to say my mom's name is this, or should I just say nothing? We all have seen some of these shows on Gaia or even Surviving Death. I saw a segment the other night. I don't remember the name of the medium, but he was just kind of riffing rapid fire visions and information, and the people in the audience were not giving him anything.
I would say that the only way that, because there are strict formats, there are strict structures that are typically followed by the spiritualist movement. And the best way that you do that is you give out specific pieces of information and you only ask for confirmation, yes, no, or maybe. Because there are people out there who, a few bad apples do spoil the bunch, as it were. Some people, are not 100%. They're out there. That's probably true with all professions. But one where, you can take advantage of people, that's especially sensitive. So people should always make sure that as a recipient, that they're only giving limited amounts of information. Be as open as you can. Be as loving as you possibly can. Give as much positive energy to create energy so that you can create a fabulous connection. But don't give information. That's the worst thing you can do. So the only exception exception, I would say, is at the very end. If you still haven't heard from the person that you're looking for, let's say, for example, you come to a reading and you were hoping to hear from your husband, but you heard from everybody but the husband. Then you can say, well, I was hoping to hear from my husband, Bob. Then what the medium can then do is reach out to the spirit world, ask for the connection, see if Bob comes through.
How do we tell if a medium is, in fact, the real thing and not a fake, or someone that even has good intentions but just does not have that skill set?
I think the way that you can do that is twofold. Number one, the format of the reading. Are they strictly preventing you from giving any information and holding you to a yes, no, or maybe format, and giving you specific pieces of information that you can not only validate, but that are evidential, that quickly identify who the communicator is? Because if you're to say, okay, this guy wore a blue shirt and he had brown hair and he was about 5'10" and he weighed about 160 pounds. Really? Yeah, that describes about 50% of the population of the world here.
It's only about 8 billion people, so
yeah, exactly.
Can you please narrow that down just
a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you can say that guy had a tattoo of his boat that was named Lollipop on the forearm of his left arm, and he was missing his left pinky finger, all these specific pieces of information, highly evidential. And like I said, if you can come through with these wow pieces of evidence from spirit that identify not only what they were and how you can remember them, but also what they see of you now, because some of the best evidence is proof of survival evidence, where they see that you have maybe done something with the living room. Maybe you didn't like the living room before they passed and you repainted it and you restructured it and you did all kinds of things. Now it's a totally different color. And all of a sudden your dearly departed comes through and says, I really like what you've done to the living room. It looks so much better.
How much fun would that be?
That happens a bunch. You'd be surprised.
Describe the feeling when it really works and spirit comes through with some very specific information, and you know that your client is probably overjoyed at this point. What is that like? Oh,
God, yeah, you're right. It is the most fabulous feeling when you've got a fantastic connection, because what winds up happening is not only are you feeling spirit communicating directly from the spirit plane and communicating through you to the recipient, but you're also feeling all of their emotions, and you're feeling and seeing all of their experiences. So you get to feel their love, which is a transformational and transformational love and healing that heals not only the recipient, but it winds up healing me too, because I'm just kind of like the middleman here. So I'm getting like this residual love energy, this residual healing energy, which is fabulous, to tell you.
It's free
love.
Right?
Hey, it's great. I love it.
Much of that.
That's why I would do this like 24/7, 365, but then I'd never get any sleep, would I? But yeah, it's that plus the fact that, knowing I can help people heal, and there are times when I can bring through the children who have passed on and reconnect a mother and her child, or a wife with her husband, or a husband. The reunion that you get, it's priceless.
That's amazing. Really is.
It's amazing.
It's wow. I'm glad that I did actually ask that. I didn't have that written down in my questions or anything, and that brings me to, speaking of questions, why does spirits interact with us? What's their objective? What is their goal, if they even have one? Yeah, no, they very much do. They want to communicate just as badly as we do, because they're still alive. In fact, they're more alive than we are. We're kind of like walking around in molasses of the physical world, if you will, That's right. The third density, as it's often described. Absolutely. Yet they are in this beautiful light
free, energetic, joyous existence. And they want to share that existence. They want to share that happiness. They want to share that joy and get back to us and say, I'm still alive. And not only am I still alive, but I'm happier and more joyful than I ever have been before. And I want you to know that. And I want to tell you how much I love you. Or I want to tell you how sorry I was that I didn't tell you I loved you. Or that I regret not living a full life, or I regret doing this, or I apologize for doing that. There are all these reasons why they might want to come through. Apologies, saying love, regret for a life not lived, or, sometimes they'll, come back and say, oh, and by the way, the will happens to be, back behind the wall. I plastered it over.
And do you, as we're laughing, do you find also that the spirit or spirits often have a sense of humor as well?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my God. Wow. Yes. The number of times, because spirit comes back exactly the same personality they had. They don't change. People don't change. It's just the physical body. It's just their skin and bones. That's the only thing that kind of evaporates. You and I, our consciousness would come through exactly the same way.
Really? Okay.
So, if a person's got a sense of humor, they're going to come back with a sense of humor. And the number of times that I've brought people back who come back with the same sense of humor, I'm laughing hysterically as I'm giving their pieces of information, and the recipient's laughing hysterically going, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what they would say.
That's, wow.
So yeah.
Really, really cool. Now, when we talk about the readings, I know there's different types of mediums. Mediumship reading versus an Akashic record reading. Similarities and differences?
Yeah, a mediumship reading is typically one-to-one, a spirit communicator coming through to communicate with their loved one, the recipient, the sitter, if you will. And it's typically done either one-to-one, or it can be done a platform style, a demonstration style, which is more of a public demonstration. But typically it's really more the individual spirit person and a contact with an individual recipient, as opposed to an Akashic record where you're actually investigating a person's soul, their past life experiences, why the soul is incarnating, why it incarnated in the past, what lessons they learned. So there's more of an individual exploration as opposed to a reunion, if you want to look at it that way.
Do you think there's an intersection of the two at any point?
I don't think so. I think the only connection that you might have would be through a spirit guide. There have been a couple times when a person's spirit guide also came through during a one-on-one mediumship reading. That's
why I brought it up. Spirit guides. And now you're probably reading my mind now, aren't you?
I don't do that.
Oh, of course not. What a dumb question. Spirit guides. This is something that I think a lot of us are very curious about. What do we need to know, and how do we contact them safely?
What do we need to know? Spirit guides are guides that come with us when we decide to incarnate. So imagine that you are still spirit, you're in the spirit life, you're in the spirit world, you're planning on incarnating because you want to come back to Earth, you want to come back to the physical world to have certain experiences, certain lessons, live things that you couldn't have otherwise learned in the spirit world. So you decide to incarnate, but you need an assistant, as it were, somebody who's going to keep you on that soul plan. And that's your spirit guide. The spirit guide is somebody who's going to guide you along the path that you set out for yourself. You kind of write out this path of different lessons that you want to learn, different experiences that you want to have, different challenges that you want to undergo in order to go from point A to point Z. And it's the primary spirit guide that's going to walk with you along that path to try to keep you on the straight and narrow. Now, a lot of people think, oh gosh, a spirit guide's going to bump me upside the head and try to interfere with me. Well, spirit cannot interfere with our free will. We have to invite them in. So the Hollywood thought that spirits can come in and mess with our minds and possess us and have all kinds of scary things done to us just doesn't work, because we have to invite spirit into our life in order for them.
I used to watch The Vampire Diaries. I know it's goofy, but it was actually a very good show. And the impression that the viewers got was that you had to invite them in. They could not come in otherwise. Does that come from spirit folklore, or?
It's universal law. Universal law states that because humans have free will, spirit cannot interfere. It's physically, universally impossible for them to override universal law. So by definition, they can't work with us, interfere with us. They can't override our free will. So spirit will always be there dropping hints. Spirit will always be there giving us clues as to what they'd like us to know, what they'd like us, sort of like the direction of like the loving grandmother. Like, wouldn't it be nice if... sort of the veiled hint.
Right.
Or it's another example that I would use is, when you walk outside the door and you got that gut feeling, gosh, I should bring that umbrella, and then you shake your head and you say, nah, I don't want to do that. You go out and you come back and it's absolutely pouring and you get soaking wet and you're like, why didn't I listen to my gut? Where'd that come from?
Or when you meet a woman that is like super hot and your gut is saying, do not do this, and you do it anyway, and you think, why didn't I listen to my gut? Do you think that could be spirit or spirit guide saying, come on, man, don't do that? I just wish they could talk and literally verbalize, don't do this, don't do that. She's bad news. She's a headache. She's going to break your heart or your bank account, You talk about signs, right?
Yeah.
Angel numbers. Is this a way that they try to get our attention, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I would say there's certainly a methodology to it, because if you begin to pay attention to different signs, whether it's angel numbers or orbs or things moving or unusual occurrences happening in your life that continue to recur, you should begin to take notice of it. The problem is we're always so caught up in the moment. We're always so caught up in our day-to-day that we easily and quickly dismiss anything that just doesn't seem to be grabbing us, by the nose and pulling us in a certain direction. So we've got to be very open to our world and our universe, and we've got to be very open to everything around us, hence the concept of being sensitive. The more sensitive you are, the greater sensitivity you have, the greater you'll begin to be more aware of what's going on around you. To your point about angel numbers, etc., there was a time soon after my awakening when I began to see all these angel numbers. Now, the ultimate question becomes, were those numbers always there? And was I ignoring them, or did they start after my awakening? I don't know. Pretty certain that at the very minimum, I was much more aware of them afterwards.
I had an interesting discussion about angel numbers the other day. And again, it's one of those things that does tend to come up in discussions like these. So with our spirit guides, do we simply invite them in? Do we get better at meditation? I can't just say, who's my spirit guide? Where are you? They're not just going to show up. You got to work at it for months or years, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. They are intentionally, as we were talking about free will, they're intentionally very much in the background. So you really have to work on not only trusting what you're receiving, because trust is a big deal. It's so easy for us, because we're human, because we're in the physical, to distrust what we're getting, because we've so been steeped in the concept of it's got to be material, it's got to be physical, it's got to be logical, it's got to be analytical. So once we get out of that mindset, we begin to allow ourselves to trust what we're receiving and become more aware of what we're receiving. Then we can begin to cultivate that relationship and just constantly work on it, constantly meditate on it, constantly try to reach out to your spirit guide. And there are lots of books out there and lots of different meditations out there that specifically focus on trying to connect with their spirit guide. And it's only, I'd say probably been within the last 6 months to a year that I've actually started interacting with different guides through automatic writing. I know in my book, a lot of that was actually inspired writing. And only recently has it gone to automatic writing to the point where I'll write things, not really quite sure what I'm writing, and then I'll go back to it and go, wow, where'd that come from?
One of the reasons I asked about how to go about contacting spirit guides, I was told not too long ago that when we do this, we need to ask for protection beforehand because there are entities out there that don't really have the best intentions. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, but it's really all about the law of attraction, if you want to call it that. It's all about what we set out. The energy that we put out is the energy that we're going to receive. So if we put out loving energy, we're only going to receive loving energy. If we put out negative energy, we'll get negative energy. So what you think about is what you bring about. Thoughts become things. And that's true in the physical. It's true in the non-physical. It's true everywhere. As Buddha said, all that we are is a result of what we have thought. So when people say, oh, you got to put on your protection, you really don't need to put on protection because it's kind of like the example of an ATM machine. If you're heading towards an ATM machine and you see a shady character kind of hanging out by the ATM machine, would you go to that ATM machine? I wouldn't.
Probably
I'd
not.
wait till that guy leaves and then I'd go. Or would you go to the ATM machine and, 3 a.m. when it's pitch black outside, when there's nobody around? I wouldn't. I'd wait till the middle of the day.
The spirit world, your experience, your journey, what does it tell you about reincarnation?
Reincarnation, it's an interesting question. What's been mentioned by a lot of automatic writings over the last 150 years, as well as a lot of experiences that have come through over the last probably 50 years, and although documented for the last probably good 100, 200 years, is all about the concept that spirit wants to come back into the physical, as we were talking about before, to learn more lessons, to experience more challenges, to undergo more lessons. You might term it the Earth School, because the best way that a spirit can learn is through experience. And the example I always use is it's like a young child. If you tell a young child not to touch a hot stove, is he going to listen? No. But if you allow that child to touch the hot stove, not only is he going to experience the pain, but he will never again touch that hot stove. Why? Because he experienced it. So experience is the best teacher. And that's why spirit constantly comes back to the Earth School, is to experience new things. They constantly are seeking spiritual growth. And how do they grow? They grow through experience. They grow through learning. They come back to the Earth School. So reincarnation in the most dense, physical, challenging environment of the Earth is the way they learn. In fact, there is actually information written in automatic writings that state there's actually a qualification process in the afterlife that states that you have to qualify under a certain way in order to be able to come back and reincarnate. And if you are not able to meet the criteria, then you're not allowed to reincarnate on Earth. You have to reincarnate on a terrestrial form, another planet, somewhere else. It's a little bit less dense, a little bit less chaotic, a little bit less primitive. Look at the Earth. We're probably the most primitive planet in the entire universe. We're probably some of the most primitive animal formats, if you will, of any higher species throughout the rest of the universe, which would kind of go to the whole theory about extraterrestrials. Somebody asks, are there extraterrestrials? I would argue there certainly are. We're probably the primates of the universe.
It's an interesting and one of the better explanations about reincarnating, because it appears that spirit is an incredible source, because the information given is that they have to come to the Earth School, because I've also talked to people about this, about when they go into the space that some people call heaven, that it's wonderful and there's unending or endless love and the white light and, rivers of bourbon and nonstop Led Zeppelin music. If you're that kind of guy, but you don't really learn anything. You have to come back here to learn. And the idea of being sent to another planet or a galaxy is really interesting and probably matter for a part 2, if you will.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, that's going to be an episode unto itself. Chris, thanks so much for joining us. Amazing, amazing stuff. How do our listeners find you online?
Yeah, sure. My website is www.montclairmedium.com, or if they want to email me, they can email me at chris@montclairmedium.com, or if they want to give me a phone call, it's 201-578-6020.
Thanks again. You've been listening to Closer to Venus. I'm Johnny Burke. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.